This position is the heart of it all on defense, and it's maybe the only one for the Silver Bullets where there's some actual intrigue going into training camp. That's right. It's the podcast daily. It's Wednesday. It's State of the Position, and it's Bill Landis on the linebackers. And I'm just Austin Ward, and I'm here to listen.
It is. Is this the most interesting? Like quarterback is probably always the most interesting, but is this the most interesting non-quarterback group on the roster? Do you think? Would you make an argument for like, I don't know, offensive line or something?
I think I'm more intrigued by this position. Clearly, quarterback is important. We don't really know, and clearly you have to have an offensive line that can block and protect that quarterback for the offense to reach its ceiling. But like when we talked about the offensive line, I think there's three serviceable options that can get the job done. I don't really have concern, even if I'm uncertain about the right guard, who it's actually going to be. I think the quarterback spot is going to be fine. I think the same thing is true for linebacker. No matter what you're doing with CJ Hicks or Sonny Styles, I think Ohio State's group is going to be pretty good. But what that means for each individual and the people that are involved here does have my interest piqued maybe more than anywhere else.
Yeah, I'm with you because I think like aside from Cody Simon, I don't know that I have like a great picture in my mind of like what exactly this looks like for like everyone else in the room. Maybe Sonny Styles is the next closest one in terms of having some clarity because he has not played linebacker. He's played some linebacker, but even when he was a safety, he was like kind of down near the box. So it's like I understand the responsibilities are different and it's not quite the same thing. He is making a transition, but it's easier to like conjure an image, I think, in your head of like what Sonny Styles at linebacker is going to look like, given how he's been utilized over the last few years. And then like for everyone else in the room, I don't know because like they haven't played. So it's a weird it's a weird position where Cody Simon's played fairly significantly. Former starter as close to 2,000. No, maybe it's just a little over 1,000 career reps. And like the rest of the room at linebacker has like 200 if you take out Sonny Styles snaps as a safety. Like there's just not much going on here, not in a bad way, just like in a way where like the mystery is intriguing to me and I'm not entirely sure what to make of it at this point. And I was trying to think of it like in terms of like a sliding scale, and I'm curious like where you fall on this too. Like if 0 to 10 and 0 is like this group could be liability is probably too strong of a word, but like this could be a group that we have to like work around a little bit because they're not quite as good as the rest of the defense. And 10 is like, nope, this is a bunch of dogs. We're gonna send these guys after every team we play, and they're gonna wreck everything for the opponents that we face. Like, where would you land on that sliding 0 to 10 scale?
I think I would start on August 1st as a 6, and then I expect by like August 31st to be like, well, that's a 9. I don't know. Why was I so low on it before? And that's, I think that's just the uncertainty of it all. We have seen Sonny Styles performing linebacker-like responsibilities already in his career, and it seems pretty good. And if you are, I'd be much more hesitant about a guy making a transition from one position to another than I am with Sonny. That's partly because we've seen him do things like that, and also because I think athletically and physically, this is where just about everybody assumed he would wind up. And I think it'll be much easier for him to carry that weight rather than keep it down. We've talked about that throughout the offseason. We talked about that during the winter when that was like still something Ohio State was considering and not definitively doing at that point. And then the same is true for CJ Hicks. If he has another camp in August like he had in March and April, just be like, well, forget about some of those reps in the Cotton Bowl or what may have happened for a snap or two against Purdue. Like that was just inexperience showing through, and now he's ready to actually go out and do it. So that could all be alleviated quickly. But like right now, I don't feel like you have to be definitively at that point. Like it's absolutely going to happen because it's fair to be skeptical till they go out and do it. Now that's those two and betting on their potential and projecting it out. Like I do maybe feel higher about and better about Cody Simon than some other people, which would be fine too.
Yeah, I don't know actually what the consensus is on Cody Simon because it might turn out that I'm a little higher on him as well. Like I think he's a pretty solid linebacker, right? He doesn't like jump off the screen at you. I think like when you're watching him play, and he probably is more of a plugger than he is like a every down linebacker. Like I do have some concerns about him on the field in passing situations. I thought that showed up a few times in the Notre Dame game, and they were kind of pumping the ball to Mitchell Evans there for a little bit. So like that worries me, but I think you have the versatility in the room to like kind of sub for that when you think it might be an issue. But otherwise, I expect Cody Simon to be pretty steady. And he was at like better than steady last year. I think steady might be selling him short. I was looking at again some Pro Football Focus stuff. I think it was like 180 ish linebackers played at least 300 snaps for Power 5 teams last year, and an overall defensive grade. Cody Simon was 22nd in the country. So like that's pretty good. Now, if the workload is larger sample size, does that grade go down just with more exposure? Perhaps, but I think he played very well for this defense last year in a way that I'm not always sure went noticed. And I don't really have any reason to think that he'll be worse this year. Like, and I think they'll need his voice and his presence both on the defense as a whole, but especially in that room, given it is so young and inexperienced. So like, I think he plays a very important role in this team, even if there's a universe where he maybe isn't leading the team in linebacker snaps, although I think he will, and I'm sure you probably think he will too. He's important either way. So that's one guy. And then you talk about, Sonny and CJ, and I would like throw Arvell Reese out there. I'll throw Gabe Powers out there. Like whatever you think those guys can offer you. It's just like such an athletic group. It's a potentially deep group. We'll have to see. I wouldn't say that it's deep right now, but it definitely has the potential to be deep this year. And I think a group that like would provide you a few different answers depending on like what a team is throwing at you on a given week. And in a way that I think is really exciting. So like you answered my question a few minutes ago. You said a 6. Like I'm at a 6 as well, but with an open mind to it being potentially much better than that. I don't think it'll be worse than that. Like I have a hard time seeing this group being like bad or like the very obvious worst part of the defense. Like there's degrees to everything. Maybe it is the quote unquote worst because the defensive line and the secondary are so good, but it doesn't mean they're going to be a bad group. So I'm pretty high on them. I'm higher on this position group than I typically am on a group that again like just has not shown a whole lot to this point because they're either young or switching positions.
Yeah, and I think that, but if you're James Laurinaitis and you're looking at this and you're coming out of spring, you have every reason to feel very good about the upside. But you have to keep it in the back of your mind that, well, the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season, there may be some growing pains. Maybe there won't be. Maybe Sonny Styles and CJ Hicks will play at such a high level when they're out there that all of this will look back and laugh and how silly and naive we were. But especially in the case of CJ Hicks, like I think that Ohio State will be making every emphasis. Like let's start with the fact that I believe that Sonny Styles is going to start next to Cody Simon. I think that CJ Hicks is going to have to play a lot, needs to play a lot. James Laurinaitis will play him a lot. I think that he deserves it, and the future of the program necessitates it. Mm-hmm. But does James absolutely know what that's going to look like from week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4? Does CJ Hicks get to a spot where he can play more at Oregon, more down the stretch, and expand the rotation? That's the part that I think is the biggest mystery for this. And it is not, I don't say any of this stuff to like question or doubt the ability of CJ Hicks to do it. Again, the stuff that we saw last year, whether that's inexperience, growing pains, I don't know. It has not formed an opinion in my mind that he can or cannot do it. I don't know. And that's, I think, has to apply to Jim Knowles and James Laurinaitis as well, because in those game situations when it truly counts, it hasn't quite happened for him yet. And yet is the operative word there.
Yeah, I don't know. I struggle to put out any projections for CJ Hicks only because I really don't know that I have a firm grasp on what it's going to look like. But I am encouraged by that little snippet we saw in the spring of those guys blitzing a lot, of some conversation with Jim Knowles in the offseason. I think about wanting to strike a better balance between just sort of playing it straight up and being more aggressive and exotic. They were very aggressive with their linebackers in Jim Knowles' first year, and I think drastically less so last year. And there are probably a bunch of different reasons for that. And number one on the list is probably giving up too many big plays for Ryan Day's liking. So you dial that back a little bit. if you're feeling good about the D line and the experience, and you're feeling good about the secondary, especially at safety and their experience and their capabilities, like I would think that would free you up to get a little more creative with your linebacker play. And I'm not even talking about like the jack stuff that we talked about before. I'm just talking about like pressures and stuff like that, and leaning into the things that I perceive to be CJ Hicks's strength, which is just sort of like pinning his ears back and going after it, not reading, reacting anything in the box, not worrying about covering sideline to sidelines. Like, go get the ball, man. And I think if he's put in that kind of role, he will succeed in the way that is pretty impressive. Sonny Styles, I think I've said before, I think can do that. I think he can be more of the traditional kind of read it out kind of linebacker. Cody Simon is probably more of that type too, the latter type there. But I think there's a chance with like James Laurinaitis' expertise, and like I know he was essentially the position coach last year, but it probably takes on a different dynamic this year still, even now that he's the full-time coach. Like I think like having that kind of focus on the position with that kind of expertise, with like Jim Knowles, I think hopefully being more comfortable with the personnel and the experience on hand to like dial it up a little bit more this year, like could really unlock some things for this position group that are going to be really exciting. So, but I don't, like I say that, and I don't want to like let my, thoughts run wild here and say like, I think Sonny Styles is going to have 9 sacks and CJ Hicks is going to have 12, even though like maybe I do, I don't know. Maybe when we do some bold piece for the season, I'll throw some more of those out there. But I just think things are lining up to like incubate this particular group of linebackers in a way that will bring out the best of them, and actually I think maybe help Ohio State find some of those like 1% areas that Ryan Day is talking about like getting more splash plays. I think maybe this is a group that can help unlock some of that.
I was wondering how long we could make it without mentioning the jack position. It was just over 10 minutes. I think that's a record for the linebacker and defensive line conversation. Like it feels like it's almost impossible not to bring it up, but like, are they going to use it? I mean, neither one of us have any real idea. So
yeah, I don't know. I mean, until Jim Knowles like answers a jack question with like, no, we're not doing that. Then like, I don't know. I think we have to talk about it at least a little bit. Like, I think there's a growing frustration with the discussion about that position because we do give it a lot of time and conversation, and they've just not used it a whole lot. But I don't know. Maybe it'll just be like a year by year basis with Jim Knowles as long as he's here, depending on the personnel and how it shakes out, and we'll see what they ultimately decide to do with it. But like, there's a chance they do it, but there was a chance that they were going to do it last year, and then they never did. So we'll see. I don't know.
I think this is I don't know. Main frustration is probably not right. We talk about it a lot, but we've had many conversations over the last 2 years, and I'm going to tie it all into CJ Hicks, and you and Burham have been, pretty vocal about like, you've got to put him on the field. You got to figure out what he could do. And like the times at linebacker, it did not look like he was quite ready for that. And that's why like I would have been more hesitant. I don't know. Is it you're sacrificing something just to work through these issues? Like it doesn't have to happen immediately for him to be on the field. It would maybe be a long-term benefit, but in the short term, does it cost you just to put him out there and give something up? I don't feel like that would have happened if they had made the emphasis on getting him playing time and done it at jack specifically. At the position, like something that he could have done. And Jim Knowles has said he was going to unleash it, somebody in that role. Like that would have been the solution for that. What else did they use when they talked about Sonny Styles? Streamline the position, get him on the field. And they did that in year one. It has never happened with CJ Hicks. And I just feel like when my frustration, and if people are frustrated hearing me talk about it or you talk about it, I get it. I understand. Like that's the kind of role where you could have streamlined and unleashed and got experience for somebody who may not have been ready for that at his position of the future at that time.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And it's because it's like not reasoning that is like applied throughout the roster. Like I feel that way about like Jelani Thurman at tight end too. Like I get that he's a freshman and he can't do everything, but he is currently 6'6" and 250 pounds. Like we know that much. Can you just throw him the ball once or twice and see what happens? And it's like the same thing with CJ Hicks. It's like, if he doesn't know the entire playbook like the back of his hand, and I'm not saying this is the case, but like if you don't think he has everything he needs to be a reliable down in, down out linebacker, okay, but like let him go rush the quarterback a couple times and see what happens. I don't know why like these parameters are put on players when and I'm making it sound probably simpler. I'm sure I am making it sound simpler than it actually is, but it just seems like there is a path for these guys to do something, even if they're not starting. And like the fact that we're now going into CJ Hicks's third year and he has like 1 year of playing 0 defensive snaps and another year, I think, of playing like 100 defensive snaps. It's just kind of crazy to me. Like even if he weren't a full-time starter yet to this point, that is almost understandable given like where he came from as a high school player and the fact that he's not the biggest, strongest, fastest guy on the field anymore, but he's still pretty big, strong, and fast. Like you would think that there's a use for him. And it is frustrating that they haven't really found it or tapped into it for whatever reason it might be. I don't know what it is. There's a couple I could think of, but I really hope, like, it can't happen. It can't happen again this year. I think he's going to play. I think James Laurinaitis knows that he needs to play. I wonder if Jim Knowles, in having to juggle a lot as both a coordinator and like a position coach in year one and like a quasi position coach last year, just didn't have a lot of time to think about those kind of things. And maybe now that James Laurinaitis is the guy running that room and only has to focus on linebacker, he will make sure that CJ Hicks gets the work that he needs to get. And not because like you're just rewarding a guy with snaps that he doesn't deserve, because like there is a way that CJ can help this defense perform at the top level.
So you brought up Gabe Powers and Arvell Reese. I think there were a lot of reasons to be encouraged by what happened in spring for that linebacker group. But again, there's not a lot to work off of from the outside of the program. There's not a lot of game film, really hardly any at all to look at for those two. So it's another bet on potential. And I don't know what that means in 2024. But when we have this conversation about 2025 for the state of the position group, like, they're going to be involved one way or another. There's good recruiting stuff going on for James Laurinaitis. You can see the results have been happening over the last, month and a half or so for him on the trail. But this is still not a spot where Ohio State is likely to lean on true freshmen anytime in the foreseeable future. So, that's the other intriguing part of this position, is to figure out what that's going to look like when Cody Simon is gone, and the potential that maybe Sonny Styles would be as well.
Yeah, that's the worry, I guess I would call it, is Sonny going to try to turn pro after this year? He'd be a relatively young NFL player. I think he'd be like 19 when he was drafted if he did that, and turned 20 as a rookie. I think I have that right. So that's a really young player. Would he decide to come back for one more year, just because he enrolled early? Like maybe that, but it might be my lean now that he comes back only because he's so young. CJ Hicks is a good enough athlete, man, that like if he pops a little bit this year, he might try to go pro too, right?
Sure,
so it's like you could lose theoretically, although unlikely. I think like the 3 top guys in this room, and that's why like I'm glad that James Laurinaitis has said he wants to play multiple guys, but like I hope that he does, because Gabe Powers and Arvell Reese need to play, if for no other reason, so you can have a better idea of what you have going into 2025. And if you go into 2025 with Sonny and CJ back, plus those 2 guys, plus the 3 freshmen that are coming in with Riley Pettijohn and TJ Alford and Eli Lee, like that's a crazy room, man. Like that is James Laurinaitis like paying immediate dividends, which is, I guess, not surprising. We were banging that table, you probably louder than anybody else, for Ohio State to get that done, and I'm glad they did, because it seems like it was the right move. But he could have a bit of a makeover on his hands after this year. I would guess at the moment that he doesn't, but like the best case scenarios for this defense in 2024 might lead to more of a makeover in 2025 at linebacker than perhaps I'm anticipating. But it's a good thing that James seems to know how to recruit, because they might need to, dive into that a little bit next year moving forward for sure.
Yeah, and I don't remember when I said this. Must have been at Roosters a week or so ago, but like, if anyone is wondering about James Laurinaitis in the full-time role, and I don't think that many Ohio State fans who have been watched him grow up, watched him play the position, watched what he did at the NFL, I don't think there's a lot of uncertainty around Columbus about him taking on this full-time role. But in the coaching profession, there was some initial reticence to like, does James want to do this? Can he do this? What's the transition going to be like for him? He's passed the recruiting part pretty much without question. This year is still pretty, interesting in terms of evaluating what the development process is like, because as we mentioned right off the top, there's nothing that's guaranteed. This is not a situation where Tommy Eichenberg and Steel Chambers are back as, returning starters. Like Cody Simon has played a ton, but he hasn't started and a full-time role. And since that season, if that's now 3 years removed, Sonny Styles was at safety, and CJ Hicks has not been a regular in the rotation yet. This is a group in transition, so there'll be a lot of eyes on what James Laurinaitis can do there for Jim Knowles now that he's taking, and he was doing this last year, but taking the reins full-time, permanently and prominently.
Yeah, and I think that comes with heightened scrutiny too. I think when you're as good of a player as James was, and like not, in fact, fairly often, like it's a little bit of a cliche, like the best players don't make the best coaches. So like it is a skill to be able to impart the things that like made you one of the best to ever do it to other people. And like I think that James has that. I think that feels fairly clear to me based off how players have responded to him thus far and how much credibility he seems to already have with recruits. But it does feel like a little bit, it's not like a prove it year, but you want to back it up, right? There's a lot of hype behind him, and you don't want it to just be sort of like all sizzle, like recruiting stuff. You want to show there's a little substance to it too on the field with the way that this group plays. And I think people will be paying attention to that, but I fully expect James to kind of answer those questions rather quickly.
Yeah, I would be pretty surprised if he doesn't, because of the person that we're talking about and because of the personnel that he has on hand to work with. There is a lot of talent there, but as we creep within a couple weeks of the start of training camp, no guarantees there, and everything's going to have to be earned for the linebackers. There'll be plenty of attention, at least from us, and probably from everybody else once they get into camp starting there on August 1st. The fact that we're done with the linebackers means there's only one state of the position group left. We'll get into that on the podcast daily for Thursday. Thanks for joining us to talk about the linebackers. He's Bill Landis. I'm Austin Ward. So long.